Hello and welcome back to Beyond Funding for a special episode reflecting on the podcast we've launched this year. Beyond Funding gives churches and charities a platform to shine a light on the major issues we're facing in society. So far, we've covered food poverty, mental health, climate and disability inclusion. In the face of growing social need and a decline in support services, it's clear that churches and charities are stepping up to bridge that gap. For example, our first guest, the Trussell Trust, distributed over 3.1 million emergency food parcels to struggling families in 2023. In this podcast, I'm joined by producer Dex to highlight key clips from each episode. You'll hear running themes such as the importance of community, how social issues are often connected, and how we can all do our small bit to make a big difference. Let's start with a clip from our podcast with Corinne Pilling, UK Director for Sanctuary Mental Health Ministries.
There's been some change around stigmatisation for some. So progress has been made. But I think we're now in that place, almost thinking, well, we know there's an issue, but please, somebody fix it. And we're looking, of course, to our services, clinical services. We're looking to our community services in our schools, and we're saying, look, you need to do something. But of course, the challenge there is that we have limited resource over a growing issue. And so the thing I think is really key at this point is that we can start to see that anything we do to start to move the needle in terms of the support we can offer each other safely, helpfully, and again, Sanctuary produce resources to help you navigate that, whilst also recognising that if people do really need clinical help and they're having to wait for it, actually the best thing we can do is be a supportive community to people who are in that position. Because again, we can't solve that shortage, but we can be talking about it, aware of it. We can think about what the best practical and pastoral response is to that, And I think that, for me, is a really important thing. Let's not be frozen by the fact that there is not that provision out there. Of course, for many people who desperately need that, it's a heartbreaking situation. But also, we need to shift the needle just that little bit so we can equip ourselves to be that bit more appropriately and actively involved.
First of all, I think we can both agree that Corinne was such an inspirational guest, wasn't he, Dex?
Yeah, his aura was great, and you just felt this warmth the second into the room, and his smile and big energy. So yeah, it was lovely. But I think going back to what he was saying, it's easy to get overwhelmed, and actually you need that positive message. You need that collective spirit. You need that shared motivation to do just a little bit, like he says, moving the needle.
Yeah, and he made such a good point that, it's easy to be frozen and think that we can't have an impact as people and communities and it's only down to the professionals. But while the support is really needed and we need that, better funded services, actually we can do our bit to support people while they're waiting for this help, can't we? So he makes such a good point.
Yeah, and I don't think anyone said it more succinctly than Julian in our next podcast, which was from the Church of England, focused on our sustainability project.
As Dex said, he works for the Church of England, and we've just given them a strategic grant, basically towards supporting their net zero programme, which is going to help churches become more aware and do more to work towards net zero. And so let's play the clip.
But by making these small changes, I think every step makes a difference, and small things collectively can make a big difference. If we all do one thing and those one things add up, someone in one of our videos that we've just done said, what we're doing is only a drop in the ocean, but the ocean is made up of many drops. And if we can approach it in that way, then who knows how far we can get. The thing is to have the ambition. Because if we hold up our hands and say, "Oh, it's too difficult," we'll never reach it.
I think Julian makes so many good points within that short clip. For one, we all know climate is a really big issue and it can feel overwhelming, but he really reiterates the point that actually we don't have to do huge things. Churches don't have to spend loads and loads of money, but by making those small steps towards net zero, actually collectively they can make a big difference.
Yeah, and I think within the episode, he highlighted a lot of small changes that each church, depending on their certain circumstances, can make in creative ways, which, again, is why it's such an exciting project to support, because what we're really doing is giving those exemplar where people can come in, create a conversation, and hopefully, the localized efforts can make a big difference. I think where that localized level of support rang so true was with the Trussell Trust, and their strategy as well was just, top tier, wasn't it? So I think it'd be really great to show them a clip of where Sophie's talking through that point about how they provide the structure, but then allow the individual localized places to adapt.
Yeah, let's go for it.
So a big part of the support that we provide food banks as well is driving forward programs that create that capacity for that strategic thinking, for that kind of future focused leadership to identify what the gaps in support are in their communities and help create better pathways for people to access the different support that they might need along that way, whether that's mental health support, or whether that's advice on money matters, or immigration advice, or anything else that they see in their communities is a really big factor. They bring people together who've got lived experience of using those services that can really help advocate for what they know would work. And they bring partners together from lots of different organizations in communities to help find solutions. And they can get really creative in terms of those solutions, and they advocate for what they know will work in their communities, which was absolutely brilliant.
So, I mean, again, Sophie was a fantastic guest, wasn't she? She was so enthusiastic about what we can do to address food poverty through Trussell Trust, what we can all do. And I think she makes a really good point subtly there about those kind of interlinking issues. And that's what I mentioned at the beginning, that actually all these social issues seem to play into each other. So she mentioned a lot in the episode about how mental health can kind of lead you down that path to poverty. And also, if you're living in poverty, it can affect mental health issues. So it's all kind of interlinking, and if we get to the root of those issues, then hopefully that would solve a lot of issues for a lot of people.
Yeah, I agree with you. That came really apparent speaking to all of our guests, that it's not just one thing, but then again they're all saying you can all focus on one thing, do it well, provide that support, be, again, like Corinne says, the person in the community that helps and that does something. They can really make an impact. And I think that was another really key point, wasn't it, about the role of community in people's lives today, and how we're kind of losing that, and it became so important after COVID-19. I think that's something that people don't really quite sit down and consider, what is the role of church, what is the role of community in today's, and I think that's something that was really well articulated by Corinne.
Yeah, definitely. And also the role of charities as well. I mean, obviously, we support charities through Benefact Trust, and churches and charities. And sometimes you can forget how much involvement they have in tackling these social issues. And you think, who's actually, working to address these things? Well, there are gaps in support from the government and things like that. And it really highlights through all these guests how much involvement they have in trying to make a difference. And they're really trying to motivate people so that everyone can get involved and everyone can do their bit.
Yeah, just picking up on that is, even the relation between church and charities, Sophie said to us that 70% of food banks are located in churches.
Yeah, wow.
And you think without those places and without that space for people to get together, for services to be given, to spot the gaps, and then the capacity of the charities to actually help create that, where would we be at?
And I think this next clip will be really key, because actually you think that you want these charities to continue to exist. But interestingly, Trussell Trust's end goal is for Trussell Trust and the food banks not to have to exist, which is quite shocking, really. But I guess what she's talking about is when we get to that place, we'll know that we've solved that issue. So I think we could go straight into that clip, couldn't we, really?
Yeah, let's go for it.
The end goal is so that they don't have to exist, isn't it?
Absolutely. And we hold that every single day. And we think about that in terms of how we invest and the support that we provide for our food banks. We are not planning on being here because we know that we can do this if we galvanize and enable enough people to get behind the change that we need to see, and we continue to present evidence about what's going on in our communities and what can make a big difference, then we will be able to end the need for food banks. So we hold that really close, and that's the sort of, you can tell I get really sort of passionate and stubborn about it, because that's what we're here for.
Yeah, it's brilliant. She was inspirational, wasn't she? She really talked about the subject really knowledgeably, and really kind of hit home as well about the the kind of, actually, if what's left is the advice and support for people, then that's a fantastic legacy, isn't it? That people know where they can turn to. People are aware of the issues that other people are facing in society and so can help themselves. So I think that was a really important point, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I think the legacy of the Trussell Trust will stand the test of time.
Definitely.
And such a unique perspective on a service and what their mission is. And it's really inspirational. I think, you know, all of our guests were pretty passionate, pretty inspirational, but that goal was something else.
Yeah.
I think, picking up on that point of passion, you know, our next guest, Katie and Amanda, they were really quite something special.
Oh my gosh, amazing. Yeah, this was our most recent podcast, wasn't it? And I actually welled up during this, so it'll be interesting to see what other people think. But I was, as the host, I was like, hold it back. But it would really touch me, this kind of next clip. So it'll be interesting to see what everyone else thinks.
Yeah, let's play the clip.
The one thing that came to me when I saw those questions about a really good experience of being included, I'd like to share an experience of when I was a student at university, and I was in a lovely church in Cardiff, and we had a student group, and we went to the Gower Peninsula, which is a beautiful piece of coastline in South Wales, and it was great, but they realised that the retreat centre where we were staying was it was on a beach, but the beach was inaccessible to a wheelchair. And so my friends decided that it would be a good idea to borrow a wheelbarrow, and then donate all of their pillows so that I could then sit in the wheelbarrow and be wheeled through a campsite and then down onto the beach. And I think that was probably one of the most potent sort of feelings of belonging, and really because they would stop at nothing to enable me to be involved and part of the group. And really, if I can put it like this, I want more people to have their wheelbarrow moment of feeling that they belong, for those kinds of barriers to be kind of overcome.
So touching, isn't it?
So touching. And I mean, you joked a second ago, but I actually started to well up again at seeing that, just because it feels like such a simple solution that actually has had a real life-changing effect on her. And she mentions it, and it was mentioned throughout the whole of that podcast, wasn't it? That feeling of belonging. And also it just highlights again, you know, they are small things that we can do that really have an impact on someone's life. And I think that clip just really brought that home, didn't it?
Yeah, and I think what they reiterated throughout the whole conversation was it's actually the really simple things of, you know, if you're asking people in your congregation to stand up, if they agree with something and they're in a wheelchair, they can't do that. And so they feel excluded, even though it's quite a small, seemingly insignificant thing in our day-to-day lives that doesn't seem to make a difference. Actually, these small moments where people really do care, feel like they belong, feel like they're part of a community with shared value, which is what something, you know, the faith and churches are doing so well, it can make a huge difference.
And just again, for a bit of context, this was an episode that we did with Through the Roof, and they are an incredible charity working to change the lives of disabled people across the UK and actually across the world. And, you know, the work that they're doing is incredible to make, once again, to make churches just do those little things to make people with disabilities feel included. And we learnt so much within that episode, didn't we? And something that really rang true to me was actually that disabled people would just rather you ask. They would rather you say, you know, what would make you more comfortable? What can help? But we as a society actually have a fear of asking those questions, don't we? With the risk of offending, sometimes there is that real fear.
Well, it goes back to the name of our podcast was breaking down barriers, because people really do have barriers just to ask those simple questions, to have conversations. The same thing with mental health. People don't know how to approach the topic, and therefore they don't approach the topic. And, you know, we're in the crisis we're in today. The same thing with food banks. People, when they get to that service, they're so emotionally charged. They don't want to be there. And there's all this negative stuff in the press about it, about people. And, you know, Sophie said, when there wasn't a need for food, people don't go. And it's very simple in that respect. But I think looping back, really, is all about community, isn't it?
100%. And actually, interesting you make a point about food banks, because actually one of the really shocking things that I found in the podcast with Sophie from the Trussell Trust was that actually disabled people are disproportionately the ones that go to food banks the most. So again, we're coming back to those interlinking social issues, and it's why are disabled people, going to food banks? Is it because they're excluded from society and can't get access to jobs, can't get access to accommodation that works for them, that kind of thing? So it just keeps coming back to that same point, that there's this big cycle.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, it was 75% of households with a disabled member of their family were, more likely to go to a food bank, which is just insane.
It's shocking, really.
It really is shocking. Talking about personal experiences and the role of community, you really felt from Corin in this next clip that he had personal experience of this, and that community was so important for mental health. And it's just really important, I think, to share.
And I think the other thing is just saying about mental health recovery. Any of us that have been through an experience of a mental health difficulty, and for me, that's been around depression and anxiety. And, my community was so key. Their ability to kind of give me room, to support me when I needed it, to be a place that I could feel safe in. And also sometimes not even think about my mental health, get involved in doing something that is meaningful and I feel is connecting. We've got such a gift to do that, and we're not meant to go it alone. And I recognise that for people who are very isolated, it's a very difficult journey. And so I think churches can come into their own if we're really mindful of how we engage in this topic. And we can be places also, I think, that can hold all of our emotions. We can be places that model hope well, but also lament and grieve with one another about the losses and the difficulties that we go through. So it's both of those things. And I think the right community can hold both of those approaches in a way that's just really healthy.
So for me, it's that quote of we're not meant to go it alone, which, again, the Trussell Trust, Julian, they all lingered on that point, and they expressed it so concisely. It's so important that we support each other, and it's so important for us to give the platform to them to share this knowledge and this expertise.
Massively, because I think people probably don't know where to start, do they? They think, oh, well, how am I going to make a difference, or what can I do? But as you say, by giving this platform, our Beyond Funding podcast, to all these different churches and charities that are doing incredible things, you can see how you can personally get involved in each episode, can't you? And do small things within your own community, within your own church, for example. So for us, it's just so important that we're providing this platform to talk about these issues, but to also make it clear that, everyone has a role to play and everyone can help in their own individual way. Thank you for joining us for another episode. We're incredibly proud to be supporting the organisations we featured today, and we hope they've inspired you all to take that step forward and do your bit. If you've enjoyed the clips, you can see the full episodes on our YouTube and Spotify channels, and we'd love to hear from you if you have any topics you're interested in for future episodes.